Did you know, to have a healthy, balanced diet, the food pyramid recommends 50 to 60 minutes of King's Chaos a week? Lucky for you, we have your weekly dosage right here. So stay tuned right after we run the intro. Hello all, and welcome to another episode of King's Cast. I'm your host, Kyle Pepitone, aka the Kyng-Pin parentheses of Spades, and today I have another very special guest, my friend, Joe Vagnone.
Hello. I'm Joe Vagnone or Omni. My associates know me by. Either one works. How you doing, Kyle?
I'm doing pretty good. I'd say it's been a while, but not really. It's been maybe a day or two.
Yeah, at max, just about.
Yeah. But for those of you who haven't known you for about 4 to 6 years at this point, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell people what you've been up to.
Okay, so as we know, my name is Joe, like we talked about before. Currently, I own an esports organization called Integrity Esports. Before that, I actually worked for a McDonald's. If we're talking about job opportunities and things that I did, that's pretty much it. I worked for doctor's offices. I worked for McDonald's. I did that for a while. I attended high school with our beloved host here. Besides that, I haven't actually had that much of an interesting life up until this point, I should say, unless there are some things you find interesting about, my oh so regular life that you would like to elaborate on.
I don't know. I mean, that esports thing seems pretty interesting. Why don't we elaborate on that?
Well, I would assume that's why I'm here. But
That is true.
yeah.
That is why.
Yeah, let's go for it.
So I want to start off with this because I don't actually know a lot. Because once we graduated from high school and we all went our separate ways, I haven't talked to you that much, and it wasn't until kind of like the start of quarantine where we started talking again. But
Yeah.
last I knew about this, when we graduated high school, you were just taking lessons. Lessons. I don't know if that's exactly what they were called, but you were taking lessons in Rocket League to get better. And then the next thing I know, you're running an esports team. So before we go even into the business, what happened between period A and period B?
Okay, so I can elaborate on that a little bit. It's quite an interesting story, to say the least. I went into the whole esports scene hoping to be a player. I've always been a pretty avid gamer, if I do say so myself. I've always been extremely interested in playing professionally. It's always been a dream of mine. But once I actually delved into things, I joined an organization. I joined an organization called Revenant Esports. They were pretty interesting, to say the least. They were a very, supportive organization. They were fun. The players that I was with were very good people. They were very good players, or so I thought at the time. Not that they weren't bad players, but once we actually got into the competitive scene of things, we realized how far behind we really were when it came to skill. If we're talking Rocket League specifically, I reached the highest rank at that point, the rank being Grand Champion. So, I was filled with this ego. I had this dream. And we went forward, and surprisingly enough, I was actually the only person who had reached Grand Champion on that team. Although I actually would consider a couple of the players that were on the team better than myself. But we played. We did a lot of tournaments, all to no avail. Nothing great. We had a lot of practice. We had a lot of coach. We had a ton of disagreements. Until I realized that I do have the passion and the drive to do something in this business, but I don't think I have the proper skill or time or motivation to actually be a competitor. I came to the conclusion that I definitely wanted to do something in this business. I just wasn't positive I wanted to be a player anymore. So, I always was a very good talker. I was a very good people's person. I never had a problem talking with people, reaching out, and, all of the above. So I figured, why not put those skills to the test and try managing? Management in esports is a pretty big thing nowadays, especially if you were to go around, you would see that tons and tons of teams have managers. Tons of teams have managers for this, that, and the other thing. For example, a team might have a manager for scrims. A team might have a manager for player rosters. The team might have an overall head manager. A lot of teams have those things. So I started up my organization, which I believe it actually did start as Integrity Esports. But we actually didn't have any financial or official business backing behind it. So I had that organization for a little while. And since I didn't have any legal backing, sorry, that's what I meant to say. We didn't have any legal backing. I wasn't able to contract any players. By legal backing, I mean an LLC.
Okay.
Because of that, we weren't able to contract any players. So it made finding players interesting, to say the least. The quality of players that we were finding weren't the best, but they weren't the worst. So we were getting the players that were in the middle ground, like the players that weren't so lackadaisical where they did absolutely nothing, but they weren't the players that were willing to throw their entire availability into an organization without contracts. So we were somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
And that was interesting, to say the least. We had a lot of players who would just flunk out, a lot of players who would just say, oh, we lost a tournament, just absolutely just remove themselves from Discord and just say goodbye. And that happened all the time. But, I stuck through it. I did what I had to do. And because of that, I actually got an offer from an organization called Desolation Esports. And they are actually a UK organization. I don't know exactly where they're located, but they were located in Europe. And they reached out to me and they wanted to branch out their Rocket League teams to North America. And they saw how I ran my business, and they were interested in taking me as the head leader, as they would call it, to their North American Rocket League division. And me thinking, wow, that's a title. Okay. Moving up in an organization where I just had myself and, a couple managers who were helping just for the fun of it and for experience. Moving into an actual organization, they had, I think, over 500 something people in their Discord. They had a pretty, well-rounded business, or so it seemed when I was first getting into their acquaintance. And the person reached out to me. I honestly can't remember his name, so I'm not going to bother saying it. He reached out to me and he told me that he was interested, and I should have noticed a little bit of a red flag there, not in the sense that they weren't a good organization or anything like that, but I really didn't have all too much experience. The fact that they were able to just pull me onto their organization just instantly.
Right. Okay, I see.
To make a very long story short, it did not go very well. We had a lot of opportunities that we could have just made on our own. They didn't really offer us much, and not to say that this organization wasn't good. I just don't think that me becoming a part of this organization was beneficial to either party.
Okay.
The organization was, quite good. The owner could have used a little bit of more experience in where to put his passion, because he had a ton of it. He had a ton of passion. He had a ton of what, you would look at someone and you would say, this is what you need to run a business. He had pretty much everything. He just wasn't delegating and putting in the right spots where, for example, let's say if you had a ton of money or you had X amount of dollars to put into a business, and you were to look at a business and say, what do we need? And we could solve it with money. For the things that we can solve with money, what are the things that we can, funnel this money into? Where like something would be better. Let's say you have X amount of dollars, like I said, and you could use that money to pay players. Or you can use that money to buy merch when no one really cares about your organization. No one knows your players. No one knows about anything. Usually esports organizations make a name because of their players.
Right. So not like buying merch, but putting money into making it.
Yes. So usually when it comes to esports organizations specifically, like if somebody were to order merch from, the Yankees, for example, merch would probably be a jersey or a player that they would like to wear, a player that they support. They didn't have that. They didn't have any players. They didn't have anybody who was...
They didn't have any like big names that
exactly
were household names. Yeah.
They didn't have any reason for someone to buy merch, to say the least. And there was really no support where I was. Not that I necessarily needed it, but there was really nothing that I could have done more being under that organization's name versus me doing something alone. I wasn't gaining anything by being there, and they weren't really getting any help from me being there. We had two completely different ways of running our, sanctions to the business.
Right. Okay.
It just clashed. So because of that, I stepped down and I made my choice to start up Integrity Esports for a second time. This time, I was a little more serious about it because I gained a lot of experience. I more so not more what to do in certain situations, but what I think is more valuable is learning what not to do in certain situations.
Right.
So what sort of ended up happening was I learned what I don't think I should do in my business from looking at the way that that business was run. And, you know, there's no one right way to run a business. It's just not the way that I think a business should be run,
Right.
specifically an esports organization. So with that, you know, under my belt, I moved into opening up Integrity Esports yet again. We actually started as the name Team Integrity.
I do remember that.
And I liked Integrity Esports better, but there was another company that had the name. But then after looking to open up an LLC, I actually searched for businesses that had an LLC, which basically, you know, had the rights to that name, and there were none. So I'm actually allowed to have that name now. So we're good. That's
So
why I took Integrity
you
Esports back.
have an LLC as
Yes, I
Integrity
do.
Esports. So
Yeah.
I'm not Mr. Business, as many people would know. So what exactly is an LLC?
So basically, an LLC, when you get it, your business is now officially documented, and an
Okay.
LLC, the actual term for it has slipped my mind. But basically, what it means, you become an S corp, which is an S corporation, which is a business that has a sole proprietor. Sole proprietor
Okay.
being me. And what that allowed me to do, having an LLC, is put our actual name on contracts, and having an LLC allows them to be legally binding. So because I got the LLC, I was actually able to start contracting players, which is where I would say, you know, equipped with the experience that I learned or that I got from Desolation and Revenant, I made the decision to go full force and actually use money, financially back this business, buy an LLC, like I said, and actually start contracting players. So that's kind of how I got from point A to point B. That's my story, if you would say.
Nice.
And now we're at the point where we have 2 whole teams contracted, and a third one is actually signing at this moment. So,
Oh, cool. So how long has it been since you started Integrity Esports with the LLC till now?
so the LLC was created sometime in early November of 2020.
Oh, okay.
Once the LLC was created, that's immediately after that we distributed the contract. So our first team, which is now called Team Integrity, you know, sort of in remembrance of being called Team Integrity beforehand, just, you know, because they liked the name. They were contracted anytime between mid-November to early December. The 3 different players were contracted at different time because of, you know, personal problems with contracts and age. But because if you didn't know this, a little bit of tidbit of information, if you're under 18, you're actually not allowed to be contracted legally for anything,
Right.
unless your parents or legal guardian sign the contract along with you. So you can't sign away anything until you're 18 without a parent or legal guardian. So that was a couple of the problems that we had. Not that it was a problem, it was just, you know, a little bit of a hump to go over just in the expense of time.
Yeah, I see, I get that, because, you know, like laws and stuff. And
Yeah, they're a thing. Yeah, they're definitely look at and pay attention to say the least.
As you can tell, I'm not that knowledgeable in like the business world.
Well, you wouldn't really need to be. The only kind of thing that you would need to be knowledgeable about is, you know, how to run your own personal brand, as in you, Kyng-Pin, being your own brand. That is probably the only thing that you would need to be a little more knowledgeable about. This kind of stuff, honestly, I wish I didn't have to be knowledgeable about the technicalities, but unfortunately you do, because I don't want to run into problems with the IRS or anything along those lines. That would be pretty bad, to say the least.
A big thing to me, especially in this whole like creating teams thing, is obviously it's a little different between me and you. I work mainly by myself. The only people I'm going out and looking for right now are guests for the show. Yeah. But you have to go out and find different players, up to like 3 per team, correct?
Yes. So up to 4, actually, including yourself.
Yeah, right. But how, like, where do you find these people? Where do you start looking for people who are interested in this stuff? not only interested, but also eligible, and how do you get like contact information to get in touch with these people?
So that's actually a great question. So the main thing that is a blessing to this kind of business specifically is the internet, for multiple reasons. One being Discord. Discord is a huge, or has a huge Rocket League community, I should say,
Right.
including the actual official Rocket League Discord and tons of other pre-made private organizations and private communities that tons of Rocket League players are involved in. Like Six Mans is one of them. It's another competitive thing that players can compete in to up their six. And it's actually become so competitive that all Rocket League organizations actually use this Six Mans to, I would say, gauge their players' worth. Because
Okay.
there are actually, because they're in-game ranks, like we talked about earlier.
Right.
But Six Mans actually creates an alternative competitive play area, I should say, where there are different ranks. So there's rank E, F, D, C, A, S, I think. Oh,
Right.
there's B, obviously. I didn't mention B. And then there's like C plus, B plus, all that. So I'm at like a grading scale in school. And obviously, the higher up, it goes all the way up to X and then Pro. So the people who are rank X and Pro are actually the professional players
Right.
in Rocket League. So this has this has a lot of backing and a lot of just community generated viewing, I should say. And the reason why that's important to this question is because that's actually where I look for a lot of the players. When we're looking for a new group of players, I'm usually advertising in the Six Man's Discord, or the official Rocket League Discord. Discord is, and Reddit once in a while, but we actually haven't found any players via Reddit.
Right. Okay.
But Discord is usually the go-to way that I reach out,
Yeah.
and that the reason why that's so helpful is because it eliminates the need for personal information. It eliminates the need for an email. It eliminates the
Right.
middleman, essentially. Like, we don't need to go onto another platform, reach out to each other, and then exchange information and then speak. I could simply reach out to someone and say, hey, are you interested? Or vice versa. They can reach out to me and say, hey, I am interested.
Right.
And then basically that's how it would work. So I would give my advertisement for our org, say what the requirements are, say what our experience is, me as an owner and us as an organization. I would give the experience and what we require for that of players. And they would reach out and say, I'm interested, I'm X rank, I'm this amount of years old. And we would figure things out from there. And then once we have the numbers, so there's a minimum number of, let's say MMR, which is your rank in Rocket League,
Right.
minimum number that we need them to reach. And once we have that proven that they've reached that number, then after that, and after we kind of analyze their personality, in regard to like how they would play as a team player, how they are as a person, do they have an ego, all those things, then we would say, now you have a tryout. Then the tryout would, there's many different kinds of tryouts. If it's a single player, we would usually, if we already have a roster, for example, we would take that single player and replace one of the existing players with that single player and see how they perform on the roster and see how
Okay.
they work and how things. If it's a full team, which is actually our most recent tryout, actually had 3 rosters, including the one roster that we had. So we had 1 roster already signed and 2 rosters trying out.
Okay.
What we did was a round robin tournament, and we had them all versus each other at least once. And then whichever team came out on top, if it wasn't the team that we already signed, we would most likely sign that team. But it was a lot deeper than that. We would look at each player individually. We would do a lot of stuff, and we were there for every single tryout. It probably lasted about 3 to 5 hours, the one tryout. We had a lot of stuff. Yeah, we had a lot of things to do, and there's a lot of stuff to analyze. We took notes on every player. And then we made our decision, and that's actually how we picked up our second roster, Integrity Esports.
Right.
They're a team of 3 with a sub, as Team Integrity is also. So that's pretty much how we reach out to players and how we get them onto the organization.
Oh, cool. So yeah, I mean that makes sense because Discord really has established itself as the like go-to gamer chat place.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
It
definitely.
didn't like come out of the blue like Zoom did, but we're not going to talk about that. Speaking of the whole business thing, where do you like rank in like the esports community in terms of starting a business at this age? Because you're still a teenager, correct?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
For another month.
Yeah.
So, if I hope I'm not misconstruing the question. You're asking, how many other 19-year-olds do I know that run an esports organization? Not necessarily that I know, but like,
Right. Like, what's the average age like an esports a person will start an esports business?
I would say I'm probably one of the younger people. For some reason, I don't think there's any real reason around this, but a lot of the people that I've met, I've spoken to that manage esports organizations, own esports organizations, especially a lot of the smaller ones, they tend to be between the age range of 19 and 24.
Okay.
So I'm a part of the younger group,
Right.
and not that I'm an advocate in the sense that I don't think age means that much when it comes to things, but you definitely need some sort of experience.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that the longer you live, the more likely you are to have experience because there's just you're alive for more time.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly.
so there is a correlation, but I wouldn't say that age reflects how well you can run a business. It's just
Right.
but it does reflect how seriously people are going to take you. A lot of people
Yeah.
actually don't know that I'm 19. Not that I keep it a
Oh.
secret. They just assume that it's not at all. I don't care. I actually like when people know that I'm 19 because they tend to be surprised. People talk to me, they hear my voice, they hear me speak the way that I speak. People say that I'm articulate. Whether I agree with them or not, I don't know. This is just me talking. But when I reach out to people and speak to them, especially, potential business partners, potential sponsors, people talk to me and, I'll mention that I'm 19 or I'll mention that I'm not 20 yet. And they'll say, really? I thought you were like 24 or 25. I was like, no. And they were like, well, I've never heard a 19-year-old talk the way that you talk. And I was like, well, I mean, I've definitely heard people speak the way that I speak, but I guess it's just not on average something that, a 19-year-old, how a 19-year-old would speak. But
Right.
I definitely think it reflects the situation as well, because I'm here as a business owner, not really a teenager. If you hear me when I talk to my friends, it's completely different. Or when I talk to my close friends, or I'm joking around, or I'm in the middle of playing a video game, it's a little different than how I would talk per se right now, or while I'm in a business meeting. It's a little different,
Right.
not in the sense that I want to change the way that I am perceived by other people. It's just that there are times and places to goof around and joke. I never really tend to change the way that I am when I'm around different people. It's just the subject that I'm talking about tends to be different, which is just how conversations work.
Right. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting because there's this YouTuber I've been watching who's also 19 and he does the
Mm-hmm.
whole Photoshop thing, kind of like what I'm doing
Yeah.
currently. But like, yeah, he's got like over 1 million subscribers now. Good for him. Congratulations. But he's also got like sponsors and stuff, and it always strikes me as weird. Like, I'm this age, and yet I would not know how to go about doing something like this.
Yeah. See, there is like, I would say the only thing that comes with being a little older is you have more opportunities to make mistakes, which
Right.
doesn't sound like a good thing at first. It sounds like, well, the more mistakes you make, isn't that, wouldn't you rather have success at a younger age than, get older and continue to make mistakes? I would say no, in the sense that I'm continually making mistakes. I'm
Right.
continually not doing the most optimal thing that could possibly be done, while running this business. But the thing that's different about the way I deal with it versus some other people or the average person, is that instead of just taking these mistakes and being like, oh, well, I could have done it better, I realize I could have done it better and then learn for the next time the opportunity comes around. Because the thing that happens in business is something that I actually learned in one of my classes. An entrepreneur is never fully prepared or
Right. Yeah.
never has the optimal amount of resources to deal with any sort of situation. It's really just the person and how they will deal with whatever situations are, up front. So, and that usually happens pretty quickly. I would say that a lot of the, the hills and mountains that we've had to climb in this business were not something that we were perceive would happen earlier, and we would say, okay, we're going to have to deal with this in a few months. It was more of, there's something happening right now and we have to find a way to deal with it. And there's a problem with a player, there's a problem with a coach, there's a problem with this, that, there's a problem with availability, we need to find a sub, we need to do this. It's all this fast.
Right.
And
Exactly. Yeah.
it's really, the more you experience something like that, the more likely you are to be ready for the next time around. So it's not even necessarily looking at something and knowing how to deal with it or knowing what you would want. The one thing I would say is, if you're young and you're looking to try to succeed in something, you're looking to try to build something, I wouldn't say that you need to sit down and build an entire ladder or an entire building scheme of what your plan would be for the next couple of years. I would say that you have your starting point. Say your starting point's in 2 days, February 20th. And all you have to do is look in about maybe 2 or 3 years where you want to be. And then you basically just do your best for that entire time and hope that you reach your goal. If you reach your goal a little earlier, set a little bit of a harder goal. If you don't reach your goal, set a little bit of an easier goal, a little bit less amount of time. Right. It's just about giving yourself things that you want to reach and things that you want to do, but not being too strict, but strict enough to the point where you want yourself to succeed and you're not willing to take any sort of slacking from yourself. Because the hardest thing about being in a business is that it's completely up to me, essentially, how fast the business moves or how slow the business moves. I could slow things down when I want, and I could make things faster if I want, but would slowing things down make the business more likely to succeed? Would moving things faster make the business more likely to succeed? That's not up to me. It's about knowing, at what optimal speed things should be moving would be the most efficient. It's not necessarily about me looking and saying, oh, for the month of, February or for the month of March coming up, what exact things do I want to succeed in? Because usually it's pretty disheartening, especially in business. You can either do things a lot earlier than you expect or a lot later. So having these kind of dates, it's not really something that's helpful, in my opinion. Just having a goal in the future, having somewhere that you want to reach and trying to get there as fast as possible is pretty much the only prerequisite you have to set for yourself. It's more about learning as you go along, because you're never, like I said, an entrepreneur is never going to be prepared to deal with the things that are coming. So if that's the case, you're never going to be aware and you're never going to be prepared, then why try? Just put yourself in the situation, put yourself out there, do something crazy, do something unique. Do something that the way that you think it is. And if you fail, I mean, that's where the young age comes in. We're only 19, we're only 20, right? It's not the end of the world if things don't work out the way that we expect. So that's where I think being young is quite a blessing in this case, is that we have our whole lives ahead of us. So if my business seems to fail at one point, or if, your brand or your personal business doesn't seem to go the path that you want, you still have a lot of time to deal with things in the future. And if you want to continue along the same path, you have a lot of time to structure it.
Right.
So it's, being young is a curse in the sense that we don't have a lot of experience, but a blessing in the sense that we have a lot of time.
Right. But, obviously we have to, using that time correctly is a big thing. Okay, I'm 19, I'm going to start a business. It's not going to happen. You have to go along those paths, like you were saying.
Yeah.
If I want a business, I have to do business.
Yeah, and I've had a proper heap of help. That's the real thing that's important, at least here. I've been fortunate enough to receive help from parents, from family members, when things like that, because it was a lot of money to start a business. It's a lot of money for a 19-year-old up front. Unless you're doing a lot of your own personal ventures or, investing in stocks, for example, you have a lot of money. It's not easy to just front a lot of money. Like me working at McDonald's for a couple of years or a year and a half would be enough to run this business maybe for another year and a half. It's not in the sense something that a 19-year-old would have just at their disposal. But there's a lot of resources that people can use, especially when you're young, and if you have a good idea and you have the certain motivation and passion to do something, you can get loans from businesses, you can get loans from family members, you can get loans from a lot of places. So it's really the risks you're willing to take as a young person that will define whether or not you're going to succeed. It's not necessarily how well prepared you were or, what resources you had. If you're willing to take a proper risk, where even if the risk, because if you're a person who's going into business and you're like, I only take risks where, I'm most likely to succeed. Well, I'm sorry, that's not a risk in my
No,
opinion.
that's the complete opposite of a risk.
That's just a good move. But you really don't have the resources to make good business moves unless you take risks first.
Exactly.
It's not really something that just comes along. It's not something where you could be like, oh, well, this is absolutely perfect. The situation is perfect. I'm going to jump on it.
Right.
Sometimes that happens. Sometimes people get really lucky. There is a certain heap of luck that an entrepreneur needs. The proper amount of time, passion, motivation, and a little bit of luck, an entrepreneur will succeed. But in my opinion, luck can also be defined as the steps you're willing to take and the risk you're willing to take. Like I said, connections you might make, like in the business world, a lot of it relies on connections. A lot of it relies on you meeting someone, that person seeing something in you and wanting to help you out, or you guys being in some sort of symbiotic relationship where you can help each other out. Right. Those kind of connections are essential. You're not going to make anywhere. You're not going to go anywhere in a business unless you have connections with someone. But I wouldn't have gone anywhere in this esports business if I didn't make connections with a coach. Right. The only reason I made connections with a coach was because one of the players that I made connections with myself, because I made the risk of making the business, had a connection to a good coach, and now that coach is the head coach for our entire organization, and he's quite amazing at his job, to say the least. It's just that kind of stuff that happens that it's not necessarily with the resources you had prior enough, right? Did I think I had enough money to pay a good coach that would help my organization this much when I first started? I thought it would be coachless for a while, but because I had these connections, the coach was willing to do us a favor, and now he's our full coach. And things go along a certain path because you choose to take the first step. It's not necessarily this path is going to be laid right in front of you and you walk down it. You never really know what path it is until you take the first step, and then things become a little clearer, if you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. But a big thing I wanted to ask you about, because you mentioned it a little before, but that you had help from friends and family. But like, what were their initial reactions to you wanting to do this? And if they're different now, how have they changed in the time from beginning to now?
Okay, so that's also a really good question. The reason why it was a bumpy road for a little bit. It wasn't the sense that like my parents are pretty logical people for the most part. They were able to look at the esports business and say, this is a pretty booming business. Take, for example, the League of Legends tournament a few years ago had more views than the Super Bowl and the Olympics. Like live viewers, I should say.
I'm sorry, what?
Viewers. Yeah.
Like in-person viewers.
And like on TV as well. Like, the people watching the Super Bowl on TV and the people at the Super Bowl didn't amass to more. They were less than the people watching a live stream of League of Legends and were there in person. I believe it was an LCS, which is League Championship Series. I believe it had somewhere in the millions of live viewers on Twitch.
Oh, wow.
And which it did amass more than the Olympics and the Super Bowl. I don't know if it was more combined, but it was more individually, which you would say that to someone and they would say, no way. Yeah, but exactly. The business is huge.
Apparently.
Yeah, it is.
But the question is, did it amass more viewers than the Puppy Bowl?
Nothing actually amasses more viewers than the Puppy Bowl.
All right, I just had to check.
Yeah, no, that's the best, and that's the best form of live entertainment that anybody could ever ask for. So I don't think that could ever be compared to in any sort. I think the time that we land on Mars won't even be viewed nearly as much as the Puppy Bowl.
All right, noted.
You'll see.
But anyway, your parents knew that this business was. They were actually in. So, for lack of a better word, your parents were kind of in touch with this whole culture. They're not the stereotypical parents who are like, "Oh, this will never go anywhere."
They were at first, in the sense that when I wanted to compete, they didn't really know until I said, "Hey, I'm in the top 0.2% of players in Rocket League." That was when I first reached GC, and GC was anywhere between 2% and 0.2% top players out of everybody in the world. And that's where I was for a little bit. And even then I did not compare to the best players in the world. Right. But I thought I did. I thought I was really good. I thought we could, make a team work. And that was, the beginning of my story, like I said. And when I told them a little bit about that, they were like, wow, you're really good. And I explained Rocket League, and they were like, wow, Rocket League is a really hard game. You're really good. There's probably not a lot of other people that are better than you. And I was like, well, yeah, there is, but I can get there. And
Right.
so they understood a little bit. But then when I wanted to start my own business, they had absolutely no problem with helping me start the business and me being a part of the business. The only problem that they had is that I suggested that in order to give myself the proper amount of time to be working for this business and give 100% of it, I actually didn't want to be in school for a semester or two. I wanted to take a break. And parents were very against that,
Yeah.
extremely against that, because although I made my promises, and I believe that my word is, more trustworthy than anything, because I don't believe I've ever broken my word. Excuse me. I told them that if this business failed in 10 to 12 months, I would resume school. And they wouldn't have to help pay. They wouldn't have to help, finance my education. I would do it all myself because I wasted their time.
Right.
And, my dad was a little more okay with that idea. He said, as long as you actually go back. But my mom did not believe that I would go back. She was like, no, telltale sign, normal story. Kid says he's going to go back to school after X, Y, and Z, gets so used to not being in school, doesn't want to go back. And my
I
mom
can speak to
believed
that from
that.
experience.
My mom believed that wholeheartedly.
Right.
And as much as I'm very stubborn and I know that I would have gone back to school because I know me, my mom didn't want to take that chance. So we came to an agreement, switched majors. I'm a little bit, not an easier major, but a major that I'm more inclined with because it's a little more broad and more in touch with my
Right.
current job, being economics, because, economics can be applied to pretty much anywhere in business.
Very true.
And, I'm taking a minor in entrepreneurship, which is obviously helpful in me being an entrepreneur.
I can
Or
imagine.
my path to being an entrepreneur, I should
Right.
say. So once we came to that sort of agreement, they were on board with it and actually so on board with it to help. They were helping me fund the business. So shout out to them. But because of that agreement, it was actually very difficult. I was in a complete utter shock. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to be in school because I was very down. I hated it. I didn't like my current major at the point. It was very upsetting. I felt very stupid because I wasn't doing well.
And this
Um,
was before or after or during the quarantine?
hmm, I think it was right at the beginning.
Right at the
So this
beginning.
kind of all fell apart when a lot of things fell apart, because of the
Understandable.
quarantine,
Right.
because personal things, as things that happened early quarantine, which I don't know if that would be worth talking about on a talk show. Uh,
Totally up to you.
yeah, but I mean, I don't care if you have questions about it. That's fine by me. If we want to get a little more philosophical, that I'm totally good with that. I'm an open book. I don't care. So I'll talk about it in the sense that because I think it actually could help in the sense of understanding where I came from and why I'm here.
Okay.
So at the beginning of quarantine, right at the beginning of quarantine, I had a girlfriend who will remain unnamed. Um, we were together for just over 2 years at this point, and we broke up for reasons. There were a lot of reasons that I don't really want to talk about, not in the sense that I'm uncomfortable talking about it. I'm totally fine with talking about it. I've talked about it to plenty of people. It's just I don't want to, not that I would ever lie about what happened, but some people have different perspectives of things. And just giving my perspective on the situation, I don't see how that's helpful to this story. But we broke up, and we were together for 2 years, like I said. So obviously this was an absolutely terrible, terrible time for me. I was very unhappy. Things were not good. I didn't think I had the motivation to get out of bed for a few months after that. It was not good. And then in less than a month, or just over a month after me and my girlfriend at the time broke up, my uncle actually passed away from corona. So these things kind of just piled on top instantly. And then a month after that, my cousin's grandfather passed away. So there was just these three major, very not good events
Right.
that happened within the span of, I think, 2 or 3 months. And by God, I will tell you, I was just in the dumps. It was terrible. I had no support system. Obviously, I have my family. Family's always a support system, but there are some things where like, yeah, I was used to having a girlfriend. I was used to having someone to talk to, someone to text every day, and that support system was just completely gone. So I was, with the loss of my uncle, and although I wasn't really too close to my cousin's grandfather, just I'm usually a person who tries to be there to help people, and I was so badly scarred temporarily, I should say, or just in a lot of pain in those few months that I felt like helpless, and I felt really really terrible. I mean, my cousin was obviously close to his grandfather, and going to the funeral and stuff like that, and going to the wake, it was just, and we didn't even get to have a funeral or a wake for my uncle because of COVID.
Right.
So it was just extremely emotional those couple months. And then right after that, I think, partially because I was so down deep in the dumps, school was not helping. School was very stressful. I was a computer science major at the time, and computer science by no means is an easy major. And we were running into, classes like Calculus 2 and all these terribly difficult classes, and I was just not mentally equipped to deal with it at this time. So I said, if this is my problem, then I just don't want to deal with it. Like, not that I gave up on school, but I said, you know what? I have different aspirations than what school can offer me right now. And I'm very unhappy in school. And I don't think I have the mental fortitude to deal with school at this moment. So I said, you know what? If school is the main problem, let's just remove it from the equation. I won't go to school for X amount of semesters. I think it was 2. And because of that, I'll have time to work on my business. And then, like I said, if it doesn't work out, I'll go back to school. Hopefully by then I'll be in a better mental place. And although, the mental part of it was a pretty big deal with my family, we had a lot to talk about. They were afraid so something was going to happen. All that stuff was very, very, very scary. Like I said, we eventually did come to a compromise where, I would take on a different major. I would go to somewhere a little more attuned to myself. And then as soon as that happened, as soon as I moved into a new major, that's when Integrity Esports actually began as an LLC. That's where all of this started. And, not that I accredit this business starting to all because of the terrible things that happened earlier about halfway through the year in 2020. I would definitely say that there are factors.
Right.
You usually, what doesn't, as cliche as it is, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. I came out of that situation, a little bit more well-equipped to deal with things that might happen in business, which it doesn't sound like that. You're breaking up with a girlfriend and, losing my uncle and, trying to help my cousin cope with losing his grandfather. It doesn't really seem like things that would make me more equipped to deal with business, but those things they help. It's not even the sense that like I learned exactly what I had to do to run a business. I just learned how to, better deal with my own emotions and better deal with myself, to the sense that I was a little more well equipped in regard to, mentality to actually, begin working towards my own dreams when it came to owning a business, which owning a business is definitely one of my, biggest aspirations. So.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So, I think that's good for now. I don't know. I know things just got a little real. I don't want to say the wrong thing. But I think that's a good place to end the interview, unless you want to talk about anything more before we move on to the end segment of the show.
It's up to you. You could ask me a few more questions if you want. I know there was a couple other sections that you might have wanted to go over, just in the sense that about the esports organization itself, but that's up to you as the interviewer. There are a few questions I would be willing to answer, of course. Anything that you would think is valuable for this session.
Right. Well, actually, one thing I do want to ask, and I think this would actually be a much better final question. What are your future plans for the team? Like right now, I know you're solely doing Rocket League as Integrity Esports, but yes. Do you have plans to go beyond that? And what have you achieved in this past year to few months that would bring you forward into whatever you have planned for the future?
Okay, so again, great question. I think it's a much better place to end off. I agree.
Thank you. I pride myself in my questions.
So, what our future plans are. So I would say that our main, like my ideal place I would want to be, like I said, set a goal, set a, a very fluid date, like I talked about before. I would hope by 2022, either early to the mid year, that we would be branching off into at least two more games. Right now, like I said, we're only in Rocket League. One game that I would really, really, really love to move into is League of Legends.
Oh, okay.
The reason why that is because League of Legends actually has the most well-known and
Like the biggest following.
yeah, the biggest. It has the biggest competitive scene out of pretty much any game. Rocket League is up there too, but League of Legends definitely has the biggest competitive scene. So I want to move into there, not only for the sake that it's a good business move, but it's also, I played League of Legends back when, I was 13, 14 years old. It's definitely something I would like to move back into, especially in regard to a business stance. There are a couple other games, like there's a lot of the Call of Duty games actually have pretty good competitive scenes.
Right.
I know Overwatch isn't that small when it comes to competitive scenes. There's Fortnite still is a competitive scene. I'm not sure I want to move into that. I don't know. But Apex Legends also has a really good competitive scene there. There are a few games that we definitely want to move into. It's just at this point in time, the reason why Rocket League was a lot easier for us to move into is because I had the proper experience and knowledge, and I did gain a few connections while working for the other businesses and playing for the other businesses and organizations. So because of that, I had the proper connections, so it was a little easier for me to fluidly move into running an organization under Rocket League as our main game, for lack of a better term.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Oh, in regard to recent successes, there's a few tournaments that our team has won. I remember we won a tournament, a Shuriken Esports tournament. They're actually a new organization. We won that tournament. There is a huge tournament, not even a tournament, it's a league, a paid league called The Field. It is run by, actually I'm not sure, but it's sponsored by a ton of huge players in the business. It has, and the prize pool totals anywhere between $50,000 to $100,000. Is a pretty big prize pool, and it's we actually placed in, there's three divisions: there's Division 1, Division 2, and Division 3. We placed in the top of Division 3, which allowed us to get promoted to Division 2. That was one of our teams, and one of our other teams was actually already in Division 2. So we have two Division 2 field teams, which is extremely impressive, at least in my opinion. And we have won a decent amount of tournaments, and we have placed extremely high in a lot of tournaments as well. And because of that, the teams are gaining the proper experience that they need to know what it's like to compete at an extremely high and competitive level, which I think is the most important thing. If as a player, it's a little bit different than being a manager and an owner. You definitely need to be well equipped mentally, and as a team player, more so prepared, like I said, before you move into tournaments and such. Whereas, as an entrepreneur, you can never really be prepared. As a player, you definitely need to be prepared before you move into things, which is, because it's like a culture shock when you get into really big tournaments like RLCS, for example, which has a $1 to $2 million prize pool. It's there's RLCS qualifiers that we made day 3 of. I think once you get into day 4, you're actually in. It's either the top 64 teams in North America or the top 16. I believe day 4 is top 16. Day 3 was top 64. So one of our teams was actually in the top 64 of all North America.
Nice.
Through RLCS, which is it's actually hosted by Epic Games and Psyonix. So it is the tournament. It's not.
Which those are the two companies that currently own Rocket League, correct?
Yeah. So Psyonix made Rocket League, and Epic Games bought Psyonix. So yes.
Interesting. So that's actually pretty cool. I didn't know you had, because we know each other. We've known each other for years, and I've kind of been keeping up with, like, you've been telling me a lot about this stuff, but I don't know a lot about the business world of it. But I had no idea you had so many future so many future games to break out into that you wanted to. So that's actually really cool, and I've seen you've been playing a lot of them through your streams, which is really cool. And I'll tell you, if you want to start a competitive team in Super Animal Royale, I can help you there.
Hey, you know what? I think you should start a team in that game. And me and Kevin actually came up with a team name suggestion, I should say, for you guys. I think it should be the Kyng-Pin Squires. I think it's a pretty good name for. You should make a professional team for super animals. Mario.
For context, Super Animal Royale is this game that me and Jeff Nelson found. I'm sure Jeff Nelson is no stranger to either my radio listeners or my YouTube listeners. But it's a game that we found. It's another battle royale game, but instead of the whole run and gun military thing that a lot of them have, that a lot of them are themed after, it's cute animals. It's the same mechanics as any battle royale game, except it's done with 2D animals, and it's a more top-down view rather than the first-person view. So it's a very, at least in my opinion, it's a very unique take on the whole battle royale frenzy that is like capsulated gaming in the last 3 to 4 years. And it's still not completely out yet. It's still in its developmental phase, which it has been for like 3 years at this point, which disappoints me. But it's a very well-polished game, and if we do have time for Royalty Recommends, that's probably going to be mine.
Yeah, I've seen you play it. I've seen you playing it quite a lot recently. I mean,
I'm playing it tonight.
It looks fun. It looks fun. I saw your stream on it. I watched it a little bit. It does look like a fun game. I'm just, I'm so keen on trying to climb in Apex and climb in League.
Right.
I haven't had the time. And every day I wake up and it's either me really being in the mood to climb in a game, so I reach out to the players that I know are really good, and I schedule time to play with them around doing business stuff, or I wake up to a bunch of texts like, hey, can you play tonight and do this? Between my little cousin and between Kevin and you and a lot of people reaching out to play with me, it's a little difficult to schedule some time, but I want to spend time and play with all you guys as much as I can. So I hope you can understand.
Oh yeah, no, I get it.
I'm all busy, but even life outside of business is busy all the time. I don't know how I can end up being so busy, especially in quarantine. It just doesn't make sense to me. I don't feel like I'm busy, but I always feel like I'm either doing something or doing nothing, in the sense that I'm not willing to do anything.
Right. Yeah.
But what can you say?
But now we are going to go into the end segment of the show, which is not going to be Royalty Recommends or name of the game, as it has been in past weeks. I have with me right here a dusty plate full of bottle caps. And the company from which the bottle caps come from will remain undisclosed. But we are going to go into a new segment called Drinking Caps. And this time I know for certain I don't have an intro for it, so I'll play a little sound cue. So, basically, for the past year and a half to 2 years, maybe, I have actually been collecting bottle caps with facts on them. The original reason for why I've been doing so remains unclear. But a whole thing about the company that makes these bottle caps is that they might not actually all be true. So, whenever I get to this segment, the point of the segment is to take a bottle cap, read the fact off it, and discuss if it might be true. So, I am going to read a fact from this bottle cap that claims that slugs have 4 noses. And neither of us being any sort of biology majors, this should be interesting. What do you think?
It's definitely not true. My sister is a slug, and she only has 6. So, there.
Was not expecting that, but okay.
Okay, well, don't discriminate. Slugs are people too.
Honestly, like I said, I don't have any biological backing, so I don't know if I have no clue. Like, clearly there are a lot of animals that don't have noses as we know them. Like, a slug, as far to my knowledge, has nothing protruding out of its face to smell things. I forget the scientific term for smell, but that's what I'm saying. Like a dog knows. What?
Sniff.
Not exactly, term. But yeah, sure, that's the scientific term.
With.
But like a dog's nose looks nothing like ours, but it is still technically something that protrudes from the face. As far as I know, to my knowledge, slugs don't have that.
I actually don't know a lot about slugs other than when you pour salt on them, they die, and they're slimy. The fact that they have 4 noses, I don't know where those would be located. As you've said, I've never seen a slug. If I were to see a slug just, slithering, sliming, whatever, around, and it just had a big beak sticking out of its face, you know what?
Yeah, exactly.
Props to that slug, man. I didn't know. I was supposed to know. But they had 4. I don't know.
Well, that's my thing. I just looked it up, like a little bit of research, because I want to try and prove or disprove these facts between each one. Mm-hmm. And I found 2 kind of different answers. One saying slugs don't have a traditional nose, but rather, this is from reference.com, and they say, quote, "A slug does not have a traditional nose, but rather a pair of tentacles that it uses to smell." So, and then continuing that, a slug also has 2 other tentacles that contain eyeballs on the tips. The tentacles used for smelling are smaller than the pair used for sight. End quote. And then there's another one that says, "Do slugs have 4 noses?" And from mentalfloss.com, they have, quote, "Slugs have 4 and they are retractable. 2 are for seeing and 2 are for smelling. And they can be operated independently." End quote. So
the 2 for seeing are considered noses.
Apparently, but technically they're not considered traditional noses, they're considered tentacles.
Well, I have 1 traditional nose and 2 non-traditional noses then, apparently.
Yes, everybody knows we have noses for seeing.
According to slug dogma.
I don't.
I don't know.
I'm actually very interested, but
that makes sense to me because I've seen slugs.
Yeah.
They have the eyes things, and then they have the little things. I've seen little ones.
Oh yeah, I forgot about those.
Assuming that's the noses. But I only see 2. I don't know how the eyes could be.
Yeah, I didn't. Noses. I guess they're counting the eyes as noses
used to see. Like I don't see how that adds up.
I'm very confused, and I need to take time to process this, but I guess slugs have 2 noses to smell and 2 eyes to smell.
No.
So technically making this...
2 noses to smell and 2 noses to see.
Right, I'm sorry. How could I forget?
Yeah.
So technically, this is true. It's a true fact.
I guess, as opposed to those false facts.
Well, maybe we'll get into some next time. But that's going to do it for today. We have unfortunately run out of time. Thank you, Joe, so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. And if you are interested, for my YouTube/podcast viewers, basically the ones that are not on live radio, all of Joe's links will be in the description. If you're interested, he is Twitch streaming and his esports Discord, which is, I believe, open to everybody, right? It's more of a community thing than a team thing?
It's a community Discord. It's open to anybody and everybody. You don't have to play Rocket League. You don't even have to play games.
So if you are interested, totally up to you, a non-expiring link should be down in the description for the video/podcast. But that's going to do it for now. That brings us to the end of another episode of King's Chaos. I have been your host, Kyle Pepitone, and you have been my guest,
Joe V.
I hope you all have a maximum week, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.